Welcome to the Central Connecticut Intergroup Speaker Meeting. My name is Peter and I am an alcoholic.
Hi, Peter.
Alcoholics Anonymous Preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of people who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve the common problem of others recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for your membership. For self-supporting for your own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, or organization or institution. Does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. I've asked Deanna to read how it works.
Hi, my name is Deanna and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Deanna.
This is how it works. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. There are such unfortunates. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those, too, who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. If you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. At some of these we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. Remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it is too much for us. But there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. Half measures availed us nothing. We stood at the turning point. We asked his protection and care with complete abandon. Here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. 1. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. 4. Made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5. Admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6. We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7. Humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. 8. Made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9. Made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10. Continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. 12. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Many of us exclaimed, "What an order! I can't go through with it." Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We are not saints. The point is that we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. Our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. B, that probably no human power could relieve our alcoholism. And C, that God could and would if he were sought.
Thank you, Deanna.
Thank you, Deanna. This time, please help me welcome our speaker, David.
Yeah.
Hi, my name's David, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, David.
Hi, David.
I will try hard not to draw a blank. I appreciate the opportunity because not only does it up a service to others, but for me it does 2 things. It reminds me that I am still an alcoholic. Nothing has changed since the last time I spoke. I am still and always will be an alcoholic. And it reminds me, going over the course of my life, again, where and when a higher power has intruded into my life and kept me alive and and that's going over the particular instances where it's obvious. That reminds me that his presence in my life is a constant. So it's always good to share and speak and tell my stories. So thank you. Growing up, my parents were not alcoholics, but they sure liked their cocktails. And I should also say my grandfather was got sober in AA in the early 50s. So I know he knew Bill Wilson because he was down in Queens. And I never, he died when I was 7 years old. So, but it'd be so wonderful to be able to talk to him. My parents were part of an expat crowd overseas, expatriates, so the English-speaking community that was working overseas for American companies. And so they were isolated and from the local population. And they all their socializing and entertainment was cocktail parties. And they would revolve around different people's houses. And so when it came my parents' turn, I would sit there behind the banister on the staircase and look at the parents who I knew during the day as responsible and sensible adults, and I saw them having adult fun, and they were laughing louder, and they were just off their rockers and thinking everything was funny, that I couldn't understand any of the jokes at all. And I remember thinking, this is really cool. This is how adults have fun. I'm going to try this someday. I can't wait. And I definitely got around to trying, that's for sure. So it left an impression. My parents' drinking left a strong impression. It wasn't alcoholic. It was social drinking, but it left a strong impression. And I didn't really start drinking at first. At first, it was more smoking pot. And I started smoking pot a little bit as a senior. And then when I got to college, I remember day one, moving in. My parents were helping me move in, and it was down in Delaware. And as I was moving stuff in, I smelled the pot from under a door in the dormitory. And so as soon as my parents were done helping me and they had left, I remember thinking to myself, this is not going to be a repeat of high school. And I walked down that hallway. I knocked on the door. Day one, 8 a.m., a bong in one hand, a beer in the other hand. Boom, I had 5 friends. 8 a.m., day one. And I did that 3 times a day for the next 5 years. And I fell right into it. I didn't realize that I was partying alcoholically or even addiction. But fairly quickly, I've realized I had a problem with pot and I had a problem with depression, but I couldn't possibly have a problem with alcohol. And that piece of denial kept me drinking through college and for the next 7 years after. And I've been able to identify that as the main source of denial that really propelled me through the worst of my active alcoholism. I liked what I studied, and that's how I got through. But I went in with A minuses, and I came out with D's. So I just got by the skin of my teeth, so to speak. So I went from University of Delaware, I went down to Washington, D.C., and my major was international relations, and so I had these visions of getting a job with Henry Kissinger in a couple of years, and I worked at a ski shop. I was working at a restaurant. I was working for a temp agency. I was driving documents around town, and and this is when my drinking really started to pick up, and I was just, I mean, to this day, it amazes me how I didn't get into an accident driving that truck around DC rush hour. But continued on. I finally decided to leave DC and come up to Connecticut, and things just progressed in terms of my drinking. And I moved to Norwalk. I moved to Bridgeport. Not a good move. And that's the last 2 years. I was living on a street in Bridgeport, Fairfield Avenue, that started in Fairfield, where they had the Fern bars, and then right in front of me was a University of Bridgeport pickup place. A little bit farther down were the ethnic clubs, and then the biker bars, and then the strip joints. And over the last 2 years of my drinking, I went from one end of that street down to the other, thinking, this is where I want to be. This is where I feel at home. This is where I feel the most comfortable. And when I finally did get sober and learned about the idea of progression, it hit me like a ton of bricks. And that was really one of the most compelling ideas that I learned at the rehab that helped me to get sober, is that my drinking had progressed way beyond my denial. As I had a problem with pot and depression, but I probably be an alcoholic. But by this, it was hard liquor every day, and I was hanging out places with 50 beer hours, and it was miserable. It was cycle, waking up totally. So I'd smoke to ease the hangover. Then my mind would get spinning. So I'd think, well, I might as well just go for it and get drunk. And then I'd be drunk by noon. And then I'd be spinning the rest of the day. And then I'd just think all I wanted to do was pass out. So I'd keep drinking, and until I did pass out, and then wake up and do it all over again. And the depression got to the point of being suicidal. That was a daily battle. And somehow it got into me that if I was ever going to feel good again, something had to change. And the best way I've ever heard to put that feeling is I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I was exposed to AA, and I had for some reason the most another powerful piece of denial was that I was a smart guy. I could figure this out. If I could just figure this out through therapy and reading and all kinds of other things, I could resolve this drinking or smoking or whatever it is problem and be on my way. And so it just continuously allowed me to deflect from the single problem that I was having, which was that I was addicted to alcohol and pot. And so at long last, when I finally resolved to stop drinking, I just decided I was not going to worry about forever. I was just going to stop today. And that enabled me to actually do it. And so I called some people, and somehow I got an invitation to go to High Watch Farm in Kent, Connecticut. And my brother drove me up there, and I had no idea what I was in for. I had never been north of Danbury. And so as we're going up, I'm thinking I'm getting close to Canada. And I packed a flashlight because I had so little idea what I was in for. I figured I'm going to a farm. I guess I'm going to need a flashlight. So, but I got up there, and it saved my life. It saved my life. The first idea I learned about was progression, and then at some point during the first couple of days, I saw the Father Martin videos, and they really made a lot of sense to me. And all of a sudden, I was feeling some hope. I was feeling like maybe I could start to put together a normal life. So then through a crazy coincidence of circumstances, the assistant manager at High Watch Farm ended up to be the manager of McCall House in Torrington. And when I got out of High Watch, I returned home to my parents' house in Fairfield, and my dad looked at me and said, "I don't know what you were doing up there, but you should have been working." And I was like, ugh. I was just so depressed and just so dazed and confused. I didn't know how to react. I didn't know what to do. So I called McCall House, and the manager, who I had known in High Watch, put me at the top of the list and got me a bed there. And so I went up to Torrington, and that's where I got sober, and I stayed sober, and that was St. Patty's Day, 1988, and I've stayed sober since. Mm-hmm. Torrington was a good town to get sober in, but any town that someone gets sober in is a great town to get sober in. So, I did a lot of things that I would not do over. I waited about 4 years before I got a sponsor. I waited about 6 years before I really got into the big book. And then, when I was 12 years sober, I took a 10-year sabbatical from the Fellowship of AA. And so I've made bad decisions in my sobriety. But I knew all along that if I ever picked up a drink, things would just get so much worse and I would never get healthy again. So I had about 12 years sobriety, and I was still depressed. And I thought, well, I didn't want to live when I was drinking, and I don't necessarily want to live when I'm sober. And so I went off to grad school thinking that was going to be my solution, get a really good career going in something that I loved. And I bombed out of school. The diabetes really started crushing me, and the depression really ganged up, and my girlfriend dumped me. So I had moved down to Virginia at that point, and I came back up to Connecticut, And for the next 10 years, I was a dry drunk without the fellowship. And I got into all kinds of trouble. And I got back to the place where I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. And actually what happened was I got arrested for third-degree assault. And so I was 22 years sober and sitting in a jail cell. And I just sat there thinking, God, what's going on? So mental health issues were involved. I took some serious steps in addressing that. And I got back to meetings. And this time around, I knew I wanted to do it differently. I got a sponsor right off the bat. We worked the steps for real. I wasn't just reading them at a step meeting over and over and over. I was actually doing them with another alcoholic. And the other thing that really changed things around for me is I started sponsoring a guy. And all of a sudden I knew if I was going to teach the big book, I had to know it. So I really studied it. We studied it together. And he wanted to do a 90 and 90, so I did another 90 and 90 with him. And that was 10 or 12 years ago, and I've been on a pink cloud ever since. And I don't know what happened to him, but he really saved my life. And I've done a lot of service work. I've sponsored a lot of people, and I feel I have a sponsor who I love dearly, and I feel like I have a rotation of about 4 meetings a week I go to, and I feel that I'm engaged in the fellowship of AA at every level that I can. The personal disciplines day in and day out, but also the fellowship. And it's my efforts, God's grace, and you people. And it doesn't work without any one of those three. And so I am doing my utmost to keep all three of those legs active and strong. And as long as I do that, I will be sober, but just as importantly for me, emotionally stable. If I'm not taking part in multiple meetings a week, I know my mind goes a little haywire. And I've been sober for a long time, but it still can go haywire really easily. So I feel comfortable in my participation. I feel comfortable in my meetings. I don't like missing my home group for the Tuesday night intergroup meeting, but I do. Well, I'm just so grateful. I'm grateful that it provides a base from which I can explore spirituality in a way in the course of my sober journey. I so appreciate that AA provides me with a rugged, exacting, thorough way of handling my psyche and my brain and my thought patterns and my feelings in a way that can do nothing but deepen a spiritual connection with my higher power. And the 12 steps are just such an incredible tool. And I mean, I've been reading this stuff for 37 years, and I still go to a step meeting every week. I still go to a big book meeting every week, and I love doing that. If you had told me that even 10 years ago, I would have said, you're out of your mind. At one time in this, when I didn't want anything to do with the fellowship, and I thought I didn't have any problems with drinking, so I'd been sober so long, but I was just screwed up in my head. But that's not true. I solved the one problem by admitting I was powerless over alcohol and that a higher power could restore me to sanity. And from that, everything else has gotten better. So with that, I'm leaving you the last 4 minutes.
Good job.
Thank you, David, for your story. You know, I met you through service work, you know, and glad to call you a friend, you know, and, you know, you talked about, you know, discipline, you know, but it's like, too, you know, I do about 4 meetings a week and rotate. It's like it's a step meeting and a big book meeting because it's like, you know, I got a built and forgetter. My alcoholism's always with me no matter what I do. I got to constantly be working on it and to maintain my sobriety. I'm going to open up and ask Cuppy if he wants to say a few words.
Yeah, Cuppy Alcoholic. Thank you so much, David. I got a lot
Cuppy.
out of your story. I remember back, I went into college when I got out of the Navy, and I was already a bartender, so that was my side job. But I was an A student going in, smoked a lot of pot. In a matter of 2 years, I was begging to give me that last D, please. I just want to get out of here. And they accepted me into the nursing program, which is something I was, wow, few people were able to get, I got in. And within a matter of 6 months, I got out. Because you can't carry a baby into the nursery or out of the nursery when you're like this, you know. And it was because of alcohol. So you mentioned Father Martin. I was blessed. I got to meet him down at Woolsey Hall. A great man and very humble. And he had just one funny story. I got to talk to him, and he says, "Have you ever been to a bad AA meeting, Cuppy?" I said, "No, Father." Now the altar boy kicked in. "No, Father." He says, "I've been to hundreds of them." I said, "Excuse me?" He says, "The ones I'm talking about are the ones where I get off in my head about what I'm going to say when it's time for me to talk. You know, I didn't hear a darn thing." He says, "All that time was wasted time." He says, "So now I make it a point of sharing right out of the gate, all right, pay attention. I make sure I'm going to pay attention, you know, because this is where we get it, you know, from other people. So thank you so much."
Thanks, Cuppy.
Thanks, Cuppy.
Deanna?
Hi, my name is Deanna, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Deanna.
Hi, Deanna.
Thank you so much, Dave, for sharing your experience, strength, and hope. You know, like Peter, I met you through service, and you know, it's always amazing to me. You're a great example of how this program works. You know, you are the first to admit that, you know, everything is not perfect, and you're accountable for where you're at, and you keep moving forward and try to learn. And I've always been amazed by, you know, your open mind and willingness to hear, you know, all the sides of everything and form your own opinion. And you know, it's been a pleasure getting to know you, working on events with you, working on projects with you, and just, you know, watching the journey. And sometimes we don't see each other that often, and then you kind of pop back up, and it's always good, you know, to see people still around, right? We go around our own journeys, and we carry on with our lives, and we come back together, and it's like, you know, it pick up right where we left off. But you know, whenever I want to remember service fondly, you are definitely a person that comes to mind, and I'm really glad I got to be here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Deanna.
Thanks, Deanna.
All right, let's thank our speaker one more time for speaking.
Good job, David.
Thanks, David.
Thank
Good
you,
job.
guys. Thank you.
And we're going to end with a responsibility statement. I am responsible when anyone, anywhere reaches out for help. I want the hand of AA always to be there, and for that I am responsible.